Joining me today is Martin Armstrong from ArmstrongEconomics.com. Thanks for joining me today, Marty. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Trying to survive the wild world.
It seems like a never-ending tidal wave where we're barely being able to keep our heads above water for the news flow. And I actually remember this feeling from the first Trump administration, although it was a little bit different because it was always just, crap being thrown at him from the media versus,
Mhm.
just almost this nonstop news roll of dramatic situation after dramatic situation.
Well, Trump 1.0 was, when he went in, even General Flynn, there's a documentary out about him, and he said he was naive when he went in. And that's very true. When he went in, they said, oh, well, you're not a politician. You have to give confidence to the world that the government's still going to be run correctly. And they picked his cabinet. And they're all the neocons, the deep state, and everybody was there stabbing him in the back for everything, like you said. And that's why this time it's much different. Now he understands the game.
Mhm.
So he picked his cabinet before he even got to Washington. And so you have the media still preaching the propaganda side. Oh, these people aren't, inexperienced, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry, but that's what we need because somebody from the deep state is not going to clean out the deep state.
Yeah.
He'll do what they did in Trump 1.0. I mean, they'll just stab him in the back all the time.
Mhm.
So that's why I think it's getting interesting because you're starting to see. I've been dealing with Washington since the '80s, and everybody down there always knew that U.S. aid was just a slush fund for the Democrats and CIA, et cetera. So, it was just a standing joke.
Mhm.
And that's why I went after them first. Because everybody knew it. And, these people out there, oh, this is outrageous. Well, do you really want to fund? One of the items was transgender opera in Colombia.
Yeah.
Transgender. What the? You have to be transgender to be in the opera? What is this? It's just crazy. I don't know. Some of the things are just off the wall.
Well, it just goes to show and I think illuminate how much waste there has been within these government programs that you know is beyond people's consciousness a lot of the time. And just the fact that it's being brought to light, I think is really important, whether that ends up actually making a difference, right now with the actual, with the real debt level that we're facing. I think that has yet to flesh itself out. But I think it's important to for these programs and for these ideas to be brought to light.
Well, I think it's part of what our computer's been forecasting. Because that, basically we're looking at most governments falling by 2032. And this is part of the process of making people aware that, look, the government is just corrupt.
Mhm.
It's they had all of them are the same. And I think that people domestically here in the States, they don't understand. They all, get all flustered about the US national debt, this, that, oh, the dollar's fiat. Take a look outside the United States because every country is the same.
Yeah.
This is not unique.
The only
So
difference is that everybody else is forced to use the dollar.
Well, the main reason even that happened was because the US has a consumer based economy. So Germany's got to sell its BMWs here.
Mhm.
Japan's got to sell its Toyotas. So all these countries had to basically price their product in dollars to sell it to begin with.
Mhm.
and then they get dollars coming back. And also, I mean, one of the reasons we became the largest firm in the world on this stuff. I was opening an office in 1985 in Geneva. And, I knew there was anti-Americanism there. So I had a list of European names like European advisors or whatever. I went to lunch with one of the heads of the top 3 banks there in Switzerland. And I was asking his advice, what name do you think we should use? And he said to me, name one European analyst. And I couldn't at the time. And I was embarrassed. I'm thinking, oh shit, I'm an arrogant American or whatever, And he laughed and he says, there are none.
Mm.
He says, you don't realize why everybody uses you. And I said, no. And he says, you don't care if the dollar goes up or down.
Mhm.
I said, it's just a trade. But in Europe, what happened was after World War II, the currencies were all starting from zero.
Mhm.
So the politicians use that. Say the Deutschmark's up 10% against the dollar, that proves I did a good job. So consequently, no analyst in Europe could possibly come out and say that Deutschmark would go down because it became a political statement.
Mhm.
Even to this day, you won't find any of them out there. If an analyst, one of the top banks came out and said, oh, the euro is going to crash by 50%, the ECB would pick up the phone and say, fire that guy.
Mhm.
There was one economist in Estonia who actually came out and said, look, 2007, we're going into an economic crash. They put him in jail for 6 months. So what we saw here in this cancel culture has been in Europe in the financial thing back to the 80s.
Mhm.
So that's how our firm rose, because we really didn't have any competition in Europe. I didn't understand it at the time.
Well, I think
And that's why the dollar became really the reserve currency.
the ability of any leader to get accurate information is, of utmost importance. Yet we've seen these cycles over time where you end up getting into these situations that you just described, where nobody wants to actually be able to give bad news to whatever leader that is in power, because then if it's something that they don't like, exactly as you said, they get put in jail.
Yeah, I
Worse.
mean, I was called in back when they were forming the G5 in 1985. And they stood up and they said they were going to lower the dollar by 40%, to help trade.
Mhm.
And I wrote to Reagan. I said, hey, you do this, you're going to cause a crash. And, oh, you went out of committee. That's outrageous. You'll never be called again. I said, I don't care.
Mhm.
That's fine. Go call somebody that's going to say what you want them to say.
Mhm.
But I was told back then I could make $5 million a year just producing economic studies, but they tell you what it's supposed to say.
Mhm.
So you back into it. All the economic statistics or everything, they've revised CPI so many times. Why? Because after 1980, the CPI was rising rapidly going into 1980. And Jimmy Carter kind of really screwed the economy in a way. He thought it would be more efficient if all these agencies didn't have to submit a budget every year. I need money for this, that, the other thing. So he put it on automatic pilot. So they got whatever they were given the previous year, and it was indexed to CPI. So when you had the CPI going up 10, 15%, these agencies were getting extra money if they needed it or not. So then they realized that, oh, that's a problem. So then they changed the CPI. They took out real estate, and then they said, "Oh, well, real estate's really an investment." So they replaced it with rents. And then when that keeps going against them, then they've replaced them with rents from areas that are controlled. Yeah. Um, I mean, this is what's been going on. I mean, it's and I've watched it for just decades. I mean, this is why everybody wants to ask, how can our computer forecast all these elections correctly? It's because it's only looking at the numbers, the real numbers. I mean, you want to take a poll, if you just called people in Washington, you'd be lucky if Trump got 5%.
Mhm.
I mean, you can manipulate those polls very easily. Our computer projected that Brexit would win. Every newspaper said it would lose.
Mhm.
Nigel Farage even came to our conference in 2019 in Rome, and he said, "Of course I'm here. He's the only one that said I would win." I said, "Look, it just looks at the numbers. That's it. It's not looking at," and it's very simple, really. I mean, you take, if the economy goes down, whoever's in power, Republican, Democrat, whatever, Labor, Conservative, they're thrown out. Like Herbert Hoover just won in 29. He gets blamed for the Great Depression, calling him Hoovervilles and stuff. It wasn't his fault. All right. But whoever's there just gets blamed. That's it.